don't push this button. Because that will set off the bomb immediately and we'll all be dead. Now repeat back what I just said.
Hi guys and welcome to another incredible game played between one of the most greatest chess players ever, Mikahil with the white pieces, the world champion of 1906 and one of the most crazy players in the chess history, also against the world champion of 1975, Anatoly Karpov. So this game, guys, is so exciting game played between two world champions in 1987, and this game, by the way, is a blessed game. So, I mean, even it's a blessed game, it's so exciting game, you have to watch it. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Tal here with the white pieces and Karpov with the black pieces. Tal opened this game by e4, the aggressive player's opening. And here c6 played by Karpov, the passive player's opening, defense, the Calo-Kann defense. And now the most played moves here is d4, our knight to c3, our knight to f3, but instead all of these, Tal here chooses to play c4, and okay. Now d5 here played by Karpov, no problem, e capture on d5, pawn capture on d5, and now c capture on d5, and now knight to f6, not capturing by the queen, because if you capture by the queen, then simply I will develop my knight with tempo on your queen. So for that reason, here knight to f6, I will attack the knight, the pawn on the d5 with my knight, and however the white will not be able to defend that pawn because the pawn attacked it twice and there is no defenders for the pawn. So knight to c3, supporting the knight, also supporting the pawn on the d5, also developing the knight, and also saying to Karpov, okay, no problem, my dear Karpov, just take back your pawn. So knight capture on d5, Karpov said, okay, I will take it. Knight capture on d5 by Karpov, and now knight to f3, developing the other knight. And here Karpov capture on the c3, knight capture on c3. Now here b capture on c3 played, not d capture, because if you capture by the d, I mean, here Karpov will exchange the queens, and I mean it will be boring game a little bit because the queen exchanged it on the move 7 and the white will not be able to castle. So for that reason, here instead that Tal said no, I will recapture by the b capture on c3. So for that, here after b capture on c3, g6 played now by Karpov. I want to develop my bishop on this diagonal. Tal said, okay, no problem, let's push d4, grabbing more space on the center, also closing this diagonal when this bishop come into the g7 square. And however, here bishop to g7 played by Karpov, and now bishop to d3, developing the knight, also preparing to castling. If you play here something like bishop to c4, because the bishop on the c4 square, it seems like more, the bishop on the c4 seems like more active bishop than the bishop on the d3, because I mean this bishop hitting the pawn on the f7 square, and the f pawn is the f pawn is the most, let's say, weak pawn in the opening, because the pawn just protected by the king. And also when the black castle into the king's side, this bishop will be on this king's diagonal, so it will be a dangerous bishop. But because I mean bishop to c4 does not work, because the black here has queen to c7. The problem is that the bishop is unprotected, and also the pawn on the c3 is unprotected, so you cannot move your bishop into the b3 example. And if you play something like queen to b3, defending the bishop and adding more pressure on the pawn on the f7 square, here simply I can push e6. And knight to c6 and knight to a5 is my next idea to making fork between your bishop and your queen. So for that reason, bishop to c4 is not the best move here. So here bishop to d3, developing the bishop, also not all of this bishop to come into the f5, because here if you play bishop to f5, then capture and capture, I mean you don't want to play by this pawn structure. So here after bishop to d3, Karpov here simply castle, Tal here castle 2, and now knight to c6, developing the knight. And here Tal played rook to e1, developing the rook on the same open e file, also putting more pressure on the e7 pawn. Rook to e8, adding more defenders into the pawn, and here bishop to g5 played by Tal, a beautiful move actually. The idea here that I keep putting more pressure on the pawn. Also another idea, now okay, the pawn protected treble, but the problem is that you cannot push it. But the idea, by bishop to g5 is that you cannot push the pawn, and also if you try to play something like f6, then you will weak this diagonal so much, and you will close this diagonal on your bishop. So the bishop on the g5, not allow this pawn to get pushed, and also it's an active bishop putting a pressure on the pawn on the e7 square. And here Karpov said, okay, let's play bishop to e6. And bishop to e6, now Karpov's idea is that, okay, now we close the file so the rook doesn't put a pressure on the pawn. And also, okay, now this bishop is active, but at some point I can play f6 and this diagonal will get covered by this bishop, and also clearing the c8 square for the rook to come to the game. But in my opinion, bishop to e6 is not the best move, because bishop to e6 gave the white the chance to make counter-attack by the next move which Tal played here. And I think all of you know what Tal will play at this position, because all of we know how Tal is an aggressive and so crazy player. Here Tal simply captured on the e6 by the rook, or rook capture on e6, sacking the exchange. Now the idea by this sacrifice, here f capture on e6 played, and the engine says that the rook capture on e6 actually is the best move here. The idea by this sacrifice is destroying the king side. So materially the black is up, okay, but here if we look into the position, we will see that the white's pieces is much active, let's say, and the white has the bishop pair advantage. And the third thing is that the black's king side is not that good for the king. So here after f capture on e6, Tal here started the attack by bishop to c4, attacking the pawn on the e6 square. So queen to d6 protecting the pawn, queen to e2 attacking the pawn again, and now knight back to d8 protecting the pawn again and again. Now rook to e1 played here by by Tal, putting more pressure on the pawn on the e6 square. Karpov here said, okay, if you want it, capture it, rook to c8. The idea here that if you capture, then I will recapture by the knight, and if you capture by the queen, then I will recapture by the queen, and if you capture by the rook, then I will recapture by the rook. I will take back my pawn, and even if you capture on the e6, okay, on the e7, sorry, I will exchange on the e7, and rook to c1 will be a checkmate. So for that reason, capturing on the e6 is not a good idea. So here Tal played knight to d2. What the idea by this move? The idea that I want to play knight to e4 in the next move, developing the knight, also attacking the queen on the d6 square. And this is actually what happened after king to h8. King to h8 they played by Karpov, moving away from this dangerously diagonal, and now a knight to e4 attacking the queen. Queen back to c7 played here, attacking the bishop on the c4 square. And the beautiful thing by this move is that not just attacking the pawn, but also after bishop to b3, this knight defending the pawn on the c3 square, because now the black is not able to capture it because this knight protecting the pawn. Here e5 played now by Karpov, sorry, what Tal? By Karpov. Now e5 is the best move here at this position, because you have to play this move, because you have to open the position, you have to open the diagonal for your bishop, you have to activate your pieces by this move, by e5, by hitting the center. And here there's something that you have to know about this position. Here the black materially is up, okay, as we said, because the white sacked the exchange by rook capture on e6. So for that, and what the white has instead that sacrifice is the weak on the king side and the attack on the king side. So what all the white has to focus on is attacking that king on the h8 square, because this is the white's counter play and this is the white's counter attack. Instead the sacrifice which he sacrifices. So for that reason, after e5, here you have to starting the attack on that king, not protecting the pawn by something like rook to d1 or bishop to e3. No, here immediately Tal pushed h4, let's push h5, let's use our advantage on the king side. Karpov here said, okay, and also let's use our material advantage by capturing the pawns, e capture on d4, and here immediately h5 played by Tal. We have to use our advantage and we have to focus on the king side. So after h5, here g capture on h5 played now, because you have to capture actually. If you capture, let's say here, d capture on c3, then simply have pawn capture, and after pawn capture on the g6, I have queen to g4. This move is so strong move, because now I'm threatening checkmate on the h3 square by queen to h3. because the g8 square protected by this bishop on the b3 square. So the only way here to prevent that is by playing a queen to e6. Okay, and if you play here queen, what queen to e6? E6, okay, covering the diagonal. And the idea that when I play queen to h3, okay, then I will play king to g8, only move, and then I have this move, knight to f6 check. The best move here is capturing, and after bishop capture, I'm threatening checkmate by in 2 after queen to h8 and by queen to h8 and queen to g7. So you have to prevent that by something like queen to h7, but unfortunately that move does not work because I have this strong move and it is rook capture on e6. The idea that if you capture my queen, then rook capture on e8 will be a checkmate in 2, and if you let's say here captured by the knight, then simply I have bishop capture on e6, and after rook capture I have queen capture, and when you move your king into the f8, then I have queen capture on the c8 check, here king to f7, the best move, queen to d7 check, and then king back to g8, queen capture on h7, king capture on f7, and after bishop capture on c3, this position is clear winning for the white. So here after h5, capturing is not the best move here, so here g capture on h5 played by Karpov, a queen capture on h5 attacking the rook, and now rook to f6 played, putting a pressure on the f2 square, also moving away from the thread. So here after rook to f8, I think that I said rook to f7, it's rook to f8, okay? Here after rook to f8, bishop to c2 played now by Tal. Bishop to c2 putting a pressure and threatening a checkmate on the on the h7 square by indirectly way, because this knight covering the diagonal. So when I move the knight, so queen capture on h7 will be a strong threat. So for that reason, here Karpov played queen to e5. The idea that when you move your knight, then you will lose your rook in the next move. And Tari said, okay, let's do it, knight to g3, and if you want to capture the rook, it's not a problem for me because I'm threatening a checkmate. Here Karpov accepted that, queen capture on e1, sorry, and now king to h2. And here comes the terrible blunder of this game. Now, as I said in the first of the video, in the beginning, this game is a blitz game, so and that means that you will see too many blunders, but however, until this moment, until the move 25, both players played very well, but at this position Karpov blundered a terrible blunder. What Karpov had to do here is playing bishop to h6, sacking the bishop. Why? If you capture by the queen, then simply I have rook to f7, and this is the idea now, because no longer the bishop on the g7, now this rook is able to defend the pawn or defend the threat on the h8 square, and the rook is protected by the knight, so there is nothing to worry about this rook. And if you capture by the bishop, the same idea. I will play rook to f7, and as I said, the rook protected by the knight. So unfortunately, Karpov missed that idea, and here Karpov simply played h6, and this move is simply blunder, because here simply bishop capture on h6 played by Tal.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would.
And now, not bishop capture, because if you capture, then queen capture on h6, king to h8, and queen to h7 will be a checkmate. So after bishop capture on h6, here king to g8 played by by Karpov, sorry. Bishop capture on g8 played, now I'm threatening checkmate also. If you capture the bishop, then queen to h6 and queen to h7 will be a checkmate.
First time.
So after bishop capture on g7, rook capture on f2 played here. There is nothing to do here. Rook capture on f2 played, queen to h7 played here by Tal, king to f7, queen to g6 played here, king to g8, and now queen to h6, and it was at this position that Anatoly Karpov simply resigned this game. Why? Because the only move is queen to h8, and then here simply I will play queen to g7 or queen to h7, and it will be a checkmate. So for that reason, here the world champion of 1975 resigned this game. So yeah, this was the video. Hope you really enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to smash the like and subscribe. Also, you can check out my previous videos, and yeah, see you in the next videos.